is the only segment where I review a Nostalgia Critic review. I'm only doing this for the Spider-Man ones. I don't think I'm going to do it past that, because as much as people like these, I think, as I've said before, I'm only doing these. I'll probably only talk about Nostalgia Critic when he does like something super embarrassing, and you don't need to say he does that all the time. Okay, we're going to move on after this point, but I'm just sort of doing these because I'm more invested in the Spider-Man movies, and his views on them is weird. So anyway, so the Nostalgia Critic on Amazing Spider-Man. I guess we've known for a while that he prefers the Mark Webb films, which is an interesting take, I guess. He came out first, he has that weird thumbnail. All the Spider-Man thumbnails have been, I feel like he's kind of antagonizing the audience, because you're like, are you asking us to get upset? Is that what's going on here? This one felt different, because I feel like getting on your high horse about Amazing Spider-Man is like one of those things that, one, I don't respect that opinion at all. I think it's pretty stupid. Like, who cares? Like, it's such a nothing movie, and even he mentions how it's inconsistency, particularly the Flash Thompson character in this is like really inconsistent, pretty wildly inconsistent a lot of the time. But I did watch his first viewing thing on this, and it does seem like he's already ready to go, like, I think these are better, and you can see they're bringing in MCU stuff, and I'm like, dude, like, this is the same summer of the Avengers that this came out, which again, like, I really noticed that he does not talk about context in these Spider-Man movie reviews, which is sort of interesting, because you think, like, hey, what changed between Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man? Oh, sorry, the MCU. That's not a big thing or anything. And he doesn't get into that. He does get into the fact that this was made mainly for a contractual reason. They lose the rights to Spider-Man, so they had to do it. He says basically he's supposed to give his honest thoughts and a unique point of view, is what he said. I don't know if this is unique, because I find it a really boring point of view, because you're sticking up for like a not great Spider-Man movie. And he does bring up that it kind of lives in the shadow of the Raimi films. I like that he acknowledges that this is a hard time living up to that movie. But the other thing is, like, I always thought that he does also kind of bring up that he almost understands this movie better. But I also think, like, he's not as good at reviewing, like, movies he thinks that are good, necessarily, other than the Secret of NIMH video, which I've brought up before, where he explains all the lore of it. In this, it's like, he doesn't feel like he's having as much fun. Again, I don't know if he really, like, loves movies, which, a lot of people told me to suck their dicks on my YouTube comments, so I think clearly people don't like me having that opinion. But I just find, like, defending this movie boring. Because, like, what are you defending? I always felt this movie was, like, if you remember Glee, like that kind of worldview of high school, which is really inaccurate, like having bullies who'd be like, hey man, there's a line. I'm like, most bullies I know were just cruel, evil people. Like, I didn't know these bullies that had like a social conscience. I like 21 Jump Street kind of like made fun of that, but in this it like treats it like this is what high school's like, and it's like, I don't know. And it's like based on 90s Spider-Man, which is like not known for like its best written stuff, so like, I don't know, everything about Mark Webb is weird. One of the things I did notice about this one is all the other Spider-Man reviews have skits and other actors in it. I have two feelings on this. One, there's the coronavirus, so maybe he couldn't do that. Maybe he literally couldn't have people around, do the sick. They couldn't find a way to do it, and he just kept his employees home. I'm going to give him the credit that maybe he did that. Who knows? So it did feel different from the other ones. It felt more low-key than all the other Spider-Man reviews, particularly as this is in a series. I'm assuming he's going to do that with 2 as well. But the fact that he either kept everyone home or they wouldn't come in, maybe, I don't know. It does feel a little more boring. He also brings up that one of the writers of Ordinary People helped write this film. He kind of acts like they're the only person. There's like a lot of screenwriters who worked on this film. So this review, because you don't have the other actors there, it does sort of emphasize just his point of view, but the problem with this review is that perspective and that point of view isn't interesting. It's like really boring. So you're just like watching this and going like, oh, this is a bad theory and this is all this review has, and we're just like constantly going to it. He brings up that the great power from great responsibility line was so famous from the first movie. I'm like, Doug, like the Nostalgia Critic doesn't get that, like, that's not from the first movie, that's from Spider-Man comics. Like, I know most people learned it from the movie, but it's not from the movie. I don't get, like, he's like, we can't have that because it was famous from the first movie, and I'm like, I get that they did change it and it is very awkward, but it's just like, why do you not... What he understands from the comics and what he doesn't is like wildly inconsistent and very confusing, and it makes me think like a writer gave him a ton of notes and he like knocked off ones he wasn't interested in, and he goes, but that's from the comics, don't care, whatever, we're moving on. And that's just the feel I get. I don't know. He does a lot of Bing disses in this, which is funny. He does use Bing a lot, which is true. I like what he said. He did have a good joke in this where he goes, Bing is a search engine you use when you don't want anyone to go through your search history. That was a good joke. I actually like that. He brings up Amazing Spider-Man 2 a lot, and it feels like basically what he did with Spider-Man 3 with the Raimi films, where he brings it up like, hey, you bet you can't wait for me to do this bad movie. I'm the nostalgia critic. I get angry because you don't have to, and stuff like that. And that's like, you know, his thing. I get it. It kind of like emphasizes the point I have that like he only really wants to do the bad ones. So like in a way, like why didn't you just do 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2? Like, why do these other movies? Like, what's the point if you're just gonna, like... Why don't you just do that? I don't understand about that. But anyway. He brings up the thing about Flash Thompson, which I've always had a problem with Flash Thompson in this. I have done a review of this. It'll be... If you're watching this later, it'll be in a card up here somewhere when I make this a separate video. Or it'll be in this at this point. It was a long time ago. I forgot what I said, but spoilers, I didn't like it. But yeah, he brings up Flash Thompson. Very inconsistent in this movie. I really don't like the Flash Thompson in the Amazing Spider-Man movies at all. He keeps bringing up how good Andrew Garfield is in this and how he's like more real. And I'm like, I never felt that way about Andrew Garfield in this. I felt like there's sometimes like his Spider-Man was good. I don't like his Peter Parker because that's not Peter Parker. Like, I knew so many people would go, why have Spider-Man if he's not a nerd? Like, that's the whole point of the character. Like, oh, he's just an awkward web designer. It's like, that's like, make some other crappy character. Like, why ruin Peter Parker in such a way? It doesn't make any sense to me at the time. I don't think he defends it by going like, he has so many nuances when he answers that question. I'm like, really? Like, that's worth ruining this character? I don't agree with that, but whatever. He also doesn't mention that C. Thomas Howell is in this movie a lot. Like, you have to have known that. Like, there's no way he doesn't know that C. Thomas Howell. Anytime I see Amazing Spider-Man on TV, I'm always like, where's C. Thomas Howell? Like, that, to me, C. Thomas Howell is the star of Amazing Spider-Man. And there's just, like, a bunch of other boring crap happens. But, like, C. Thomas Howell, why didn't he bring that up? I will agree with him, the Stan Lee cameo is maybe one of the best. It's really good. I still like that fight scene with Stan Lee in the library. I will agree that's good. This movie isn't, like, the worst Spider-Man movie, but it isn't like one I ever really want to watch or think about again. So this was an interesting review for me. No one who defends this movie makes that much of a better argument. It's just the whole thing with Amazing Spider-Man is they kind of defend like, oh, it's more real, it's more like this, it's so different, but it's sort of like different in this crappy middling studio way that to me it's like, when people say that, I don't think they're really smart. I just look at it and go, oh, you have no taste. And to me, like, that's probably the thing with Doug Walker is like, duh, he has no taste. All he really cares about is nitpicking a bad movie. So to someone who nitpicks a bad movie, a movie that's just middling and just like sort of checks all these boxes and crap is a good movie. But like, that isn't a good movie, that's a bad movie. I just don't think the Nostalgia Critic basically had the problem of everyone who defends the Amazing Spider-Man movie never has a good theory. Their only theory is that this is more real, this is more like a movie, but like, what does that even mean? Like, I think the highly stylized thing is much more of a movie and much more adapted from a specific creator's vision of Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man is just kind of like the basic idea of 90s comics. You're not doing Todd McFarlane, you're not doing the specific Clone Wars, you're not doing Black Suit or anything like that. You're just like kind of the overall vibe of Spider-Man, and that's relatively boring. Yeah, so I think in that sense, the Amazing Spider-Man is why those movies didn't hold up for me, and why this review is probably his weakest of all the theory ones, even though it is more just him talking to a camera and none of his over like characters or him dressing up as anything, because like when you strip all that away, you have to have something, you're basically just showing the core of the review, and when your core is essentially rotten and, you know, not holding up anything, it's not really going to work. Alright,